Should the Carolina Panthers take a wide receiver at 8? I'll give you the case for and against right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because tomorrow is Friday. And what do I do on Fridays throughout the offseason? I answer your weekly Friday mailbag question. So this is what you got to do. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council, or just simply at me over on Blue Sky to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Should the Carolina Panthers take a wide receiver with the 8th overall pick later on this month in the 2025 NFL Draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin? People are asking, they're wondering, they're pondering if that is the best move for this organization moving forward. We all know that Bryce Young looked spectacular in that Week 18 game and played like a top 10 quarterback in the final 9 games of the season, according to Pro Football Focus. So why not continue to build around your third-year quarterback who is a clear-cut starter heading into 2025? Once again, why not add another piece to that wide receiver core? Or are there other things that Carolina should be focused on at 8 instead at the end of the month here in Carolina? Now, later on in the show, going to talk to Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns and get his perspective on Matthew Golden and his ascension in Austin this past season. He's somebody that we talked about. Keith Sanchez on Monday. We talked to him, and he was saying that he thinks Matthew Golden would make sense at 8 for Carolina. So we'll talk to someone who's been around the Longhorn program for a while and get his perspective on whether Matthew Golden is worthy of going in the top 10 and what he would bring to Carolina, what he brings to the table overall, and kind of how we got to this point to where I don't think preseason anyone was expecting Matthew Golden to be a potential top 10 pick, let alone a first-round pick. So how did he get here? We'll talk about that ascension that Matthew Golden had at Texas this past season, later on with Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns. In the meantime, let's talk about the case for and against the Panthers going to a wide receiver at 8th overall in the draft later on this month. The case for, let's start off there. Got 3 things I'm looking at when making this pro-cons list here on the show. Number 1, I already kind of mentioned this. Continue to build around Bryce Young. You look at the wide receiver core right now, it is certainly in a far better place this time this year than it was last year around this time. And yeah, they had not added Xavier Legette yet. They had not added Jalen Coker yet. They had Adam Thielen, and they brought in, I don't even think Devin Moore was around yet. So there was a lot of questions around what Carolina was going to do at that receiver spot. They had traded for Deontay Johnson, so you felt good about, okay, that's going to be your 1-2 punch, but you still need more. And we know how things played out. Deontay Johnson, that was a failed experiment here for 7 games at Carolina. Adam Thielen missed 7 games, but came back and was still their best receiver. Legette, Coker, both of those guys showed signs as rookies here. And now you're excited about what they can become moving forward here, not just this season, but past 2025. But I do still feel like this would be a great sign and an opportunity for this organization to show that they're still committed to Bryce Young and committed to building the best team around their quarterback. They did not do that in 2023 when they traded away DJ Moore in an effort to get up to number 1 pick to get Bryce Young. How was Bryce or CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson or any of the quarterbacks taken there? How are they supposed to have success when you trade away McCaffrey and DJ Moore just to be able to have the assets to get up there to number 1 to take a quarterback? So since then, Carolina's really had to build around their quarterback, and I'm hoping that they still want to do that right now. And you look at some of the quotes that Dan Morgan put out there when looking at potentially getting a receiver this offseason, whether it be in free agency or in the draft. He said, we're looking to bring in playmakers in here on both sides of the ball. We're just going to bring the best players in here, not so much focus on just building it around a particular person. So he kind of brushed aside the question of, are you building around Bryce Young? We're trying to build an overall team, which obviously is the right approach. But we understand when you have a centerpiece, and that centerpiece typically is your quarterback, you want to make sure that that quarterback has a good offensive line, which is the case now. You want to make sure that they have a complementary run game as well, which I think is the case now. And you want to make sure he has pass catchers. And right now, pass catchers are way better than the pass catchers were back in his rookie year here in 2023. And Dan did say that they had obvious needs on a defensive front, but he also said defense is definitely a point of emphasis, but we're also not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball. And they have not done that. They've brought back Austin Corbett, Cade Mays, Brady Christensen, and everybody else on the offensive line for another season to keep that continuity. They brought back they did not bring back Ian Thomas. They brought back Tommy Tremble, which is certainly a far more welcoming thing for Carolina Panther fans out there than having Ian Thomas again here. He's now in Las Vegas with the Raiders for the time being, but they brought back Tommy Tremble. They brought in Rico Dowdle. They have done things to keep the offense where it was at, but also to improve the offense heading into this season. But they have not necessarily added another piece at wide receiver other than bringing back David Moore. So I would personally like to see them continue to build around Bryce by adding a receiver. Potentially that could be the case at 8 is that would be them continue to build around Bryce. Another one, the case 4 is this is the last year of Adam Thielen in all likelihood in Carolina. He's going to be 35 in August. So by time toe meets leather there in September to start the season, 35-year-old player at receiver coming off of a season where he missed 7 games due to a hamstring injury. And when he was healthy, he played well, especially in the latter part of the season. And he has been the one consistent player at receiver the last 2 seasons for Bryce Young. And well, in 2023, there was nobody. And last year, there were injuries to Thielen. Johnson had his own issues, as we know. Coker, Leggett, those guys also had some injuries, but Adam Thielen still was the one consistent player in Carolina. Has rewarded him for his play over the last couple of seasons. This offseason, back on March 18th, he signed a revised 1-year contract worth up to $8.75 million with an additional $4 million available through performance incentives. And if he hits the incentives, then, well, that's going to be $12.75 million. Maybe it's up to worth 8.75. So with an additional 4. So about $13 million potentially that Adam Thielen can make this year. But I'm guessing this is probably going to be it. And Adam mentioned as the season was over that he was going to contemplate whether it was time to retire. And he said every year since leaving Minnesota, then coming to Carolina that offseason, he has talked to his family, taken a couple weeks, and contemplated, does he still want to do this? Does he still want to lay his body out on the line? And after playing your 35th-year-old season in the NFL, I'm guessing probably going to be time to move on. So Adam Thielen would not bank on him being here in 2026. He'd have to sign a brand new contract. There were a couple void years on that deal that he signed here last month, but I'm guessing this is probably it for Adam Thielen. And the last one, too, to look at a case 4 is they're still missing a true wide receiver 1, at least in my opinion, and in the opinions of plenty of people who have been asking the questions constantly of, is Carolina going to go out there and get Deebo Samuel? Are they going to get Brandon Ayuk, who apparently on Wednesday, John Lynch, the general manager out there in San Francisco, said that he's going to stay here for another season, and then we'll see what happens after that. But Ayuk doesn't appear to be out on the market. DK Metcalf, Carolina, they called about him. That did not work out as he's now a Pittsburgh Steeler. So clearly they've wanted, at least of DK, to add a top-tier receiver to this unit this offseason, but weren't able to do that. Now, the Panthers, you look at it, have not replaced DJ Moore in the 2 off seasons where they got rid of him. So 2 years ago, they brought in Adam Thielen, they brought in DJ Chark, and Adam was really good, but Adam was not DJ Moore and has not been DJ Moore the last 2 seasons that they have been in Chicago and Carolina respectively. And then last year, Adam, when healthy, was good. And Leggett, obviously, Xavier showed some stuff, Jalen showed some stuff, but none of those guys right now are true DJ Moore replacements. Maybe down the road, that will be Xavier Leggett. And Dave Canales had an interesting quote about him on Tuesday when speaking to the media at the NFL League meetings down there in Palm Beach, Florida. In 2018 also was a long time ago for Adam Thielen, the last time he was an All-Pro and a Pro Bowler, when he had like 113 receptions and 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. He was outstanding that 2-year period in 2017 and 18 with Minnesota. So I don't look at this roster right now, this receiver core, and see a bona fide number one, see someone who strikes the fear in the hearts of defensive coordinators out there and cornerbacks and safeties in the NFL right now. I just don't see that guy. And it's not necessarily a problem, but I do think eventually, especially if Bryce is going to be your quarterback, whoever's going to be a quarterback long-term, you would want to get them one of those kind of guys. You look at Cincinnati, you can argue how good T. Higgins really would be if they didn't have, obviously, Joe Burrow, but really Jamar Chase opposite of him. It doesn't matter. T. Higgins is a really good player. Chris Godwin, same case, really good player down there in Tampa, playing with another really good receiver in Jamar Chase in Cincinnati and Mike Evans in Tampa, respectively. Those teams have two. Carolina right now, they don't have one. All I'm asking for is one. And if you want to argue about Godwin and T, fine. Those teams have 1.5. Carolina doesn't have one, maybe not even a half just yet. So let's see if they are aggressive in trying to do that and getting a wide receiver one. So that would be the third case for. So continue to build around Bryce last year for Adam Thielen in all likelihood, and they're still missing a wide receiver one. The case against, well, they address wide receiver last offseason, and arguably there are bigger needs on this roster. And Dave Canales, he did say at the NFL owners meetings down there in Palm Beach at the Breakers Hotel on Tuesday that they were content going into the season with what they have. Now, of course, that's pending what happens in the draft. He's going to say right now, yeah, we're good. We got Adam, we got Xavier, got David coming back after a really good year for us and the role he had to play, got Jalen. So, yeah, we're fine. We're good with what we have because you saw at the end of the season, like that was the 4. And those guys helped Carolina win games. And Bryce was able to have success with them behind a really good offensive line. So, all right, we have seen that they can get through a decent chunk of the season with those being the top 4 receivers here in Carolina. And if that's the top 4 and you've been able to win with them and there's continuity there and you got 2 young guys in Coker and Leggett who were through a full offseason, you would guess would take another step here in 2025, then probably you don't need to really get a wide receiver as early as 8, and that there are bigger needs. And I've talked about this edge rusher, Jalen Walker in particular from Georgia, Salisbury native. That's who I would love to see come to Carolina to be able to play that edge rusher spot and potentially play off ball or both. We'll see what happens when he gets here. If he gets here, of course, if he gets here, but I would love for him to come to Charlotte, come back home to the Carolinas. But edge, in my opinion, is a bigger need. As like with DJ Moore, they have not replaced Brian Burns. Now, with the DJ Moore situation, you could make the argument that they have drafted a replacement, and that is Xavier Leggett. He just has not developed into that replacement as of this moment. Where you look at the roster right now, Jadeveon Clowney, maybe his last season in Carolina and in the NFL period. DJ Woodham, there's upside there, but no. Pat Jones, second, just a guy. So they don't have the replacement of Brian Burns on the roster right now. And at 8, that may make way more sense for Carolina. Another one, as far as case for against, is bringing up Xavier Leggett, the faith that the Panthers organization has in Xavier Leggett at this moment. Dave Canales, again, speaking at the NFL league meetings down there at the Breakers Hotel earlier this week, saying, quote, I think we've got that guy when asked about the Panthers trying to acquire a wide receiver one. He says, I think it's Xavier. And I think it's up to the coaches to just continue to develop him and let him grow at his pace. So for me, the goal for Xavier Leggett is let's just take the next step. This is going to be his first offseason with us from phase 1 all the way through. And I just love to see where that goes. You got a guy who's 6'2.5", 225 pounds and runs a 4.3, and he's a playmaker. It's on film. And so it's like, let's start there. Let's just take the next step with him. So Dave is at least taking a more patient approach where, okay, Carolina decided that they wanted to draft into the first round last year, primarily so that they could have the 5th-year option for Xavier. He would have been there for them at 33, based off, I'm sure, the conversations that Brandon Beam, the general manager up there in Buffalo, and Dan Morgan had on draft night a year ago, and when they made the decision that, okay, Buffalo, you want Keon, we want Xavier, but we would like the 5th-year option. Let's give up a little bit of pieces here for that to happen draft compensation-wise. So they got their guy. And they feel like this is the guy who can be it down the road. Now, right now, is that the case? No. And will it ever be the case? I'm not quite so sure. I think he's probably more of a number 2 than the number 1, but there's a belief in Xavier Leggett, and they just got him last draft, which kind of goes back to the first case against. They addressed wide receiver last offseason. In the third one, this is not necessarily the best wide receiver class. I don't know if there's just a clear-cut dude who's going to come into the league and be that number 1 guy. Like last year, Marvin Harrison Jr. felt like a no-brainer. Roma Dunze felt like a no-brainer as well. Malik Neighbors. Like there were 3 right there in the top 10 that, oh yeah, for sure. Is there a single guy going in the top 10 this year from the wide receiver class here? I don't think so. Like 9 wide receivers went in the first 34 picks a year ago. 10, if you want to stretch it out to 37 picks, and that includes Jalen Polk, who went to the Patriots. So 10 in the first 37 picks, wide receivers off the board. Field Yates of ESPN put out a mock draft on Wednesday with 3 receivers going in the first round. Ted McMillan was the earliest at 12, had Matthew Golden going in the 20s, and then in the 30s had Luther Burden the third at a Mizzou. So that's 3 guys. Now, he did have 9 going in the first 2 rounds, and that's compared to 11 last year, but again, 7 in the first round, 9 in the first 34, 10 in the first 37. That was a better receiver class last season. If you're looking for that bona fide number 1 this year, which Carolina may not be, I don't know if 8th overall or really at any point in the first or second round, you're going to find that guy. Maybe it's Ted McMillan, maybe it's Matthew Golden. We'll see. So that's the case against. They addressed it last offseason. There were bigger needs. They had faith in Xavier Leggett, who, again, they just got last offseason. And it's not like this is the best receiver class as far as the top end potential number 1 talent that's out there. So should the Panthers take a wide receiver at 8? Well, maybe not. But we'll certainly talk to Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns here on the other side and get his perspective on Matthew Golden and whether he is worth Carolina taking at 8th overall and what he was able to do in Austin this past year. We'll talk to him in just a moment here on Locked On Panthers. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guaranteed, you can book with total confidence. And this weekend, the Final Four is going on. I think women's down there in Tampa, the men's in San Antonio. Go check that out over on Game Time. Also, down in Darlington, got some racing going on. Throwback weekend in NASCAR. I'll be down there, so go check it out as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, and as promised, the host of Locked On Longhorns, Brad Kellner. Check him out over on Twitter at Locked On Horns and also at Brad Kellner, which is very simple. Love when people have their names, like me, Julian Council over on Twitter and Blue Sky. It's always nice when you actually can get your name on social media, Brad, not have to give like Brad Kellner, like 25, all that kind of stuff. So how you doing, man? Welcome to the network, by the way, because you are the new host of Locked On Longhorns. Go check them out as the Lady Horns are in the Final Four, right? Vic Schaefer's taking them down to Tampa, so big weekend for them. But appreciate you hopping on the show today, bro.
Yeah, anytime. Appreciate you having me. And I know there's been a Longhorn to Panther pipeline over these last couple of years. So we'll see if that continues in the draft here in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, taking JT Tavion Sanders tight end. They're in the first row of the 4th round, the first pick of the 4th round. And then surprisingly for me and a lot of people, taking Jonathan Brooks there in the 2nd round, which no one expected they were going to take a running back that early. And unfortunately, things have not worked out so far there, but we'll see. There's still plenty of time. This organization believes in the running back position and being aggressive and getting them. So we'll see if Brooks can get healthy and make an impact. But today, man, let's focus on another Longhorn who may be coming to Carolina, and that's Matthew Golden. I had Keith Sanchez, host of Locked On NFL Draft, on the show on Monday, and he was talking about he feels that Matthew Golden is a top 10 receiver as far as a top 10 player in this draft. And he could make sense for Carolina, who's sitting there at 8. And I think the Panthers should be looking potentially getting a receiver there to continue to build around Bryce Young and find that true DJ Moore replacement and find that wide receiver 1. I don't know what you thought, but from the outside perspective, I did not expect Matthew Golden to be in this spot heading into the draft in a couple of weeks. What were the expectations down there in Austin when he came over from Houston? And like, what did it end up actually being?
Yeah, it's funny. Texas brought in 3 transfer portal receivers last offseason, and I think Matthew Golden was the least talked about, right? Texas went out and got Isaiah Bond from Alabama, who was the number 1 receiver in the entire portal. They went and got Silas Bolden from Oregon State, who led Oregon State in catches and receiving yards in 2023. So those guys were kind of talked about a little bit more. And Matthew Golden, just a guy from the University of Houston, wasn't expected to do that much, but he quickly became Quinn Ewers' favorite target down here. And, it's funny, Julian, like it usually takes multiple years for a player to become a fan favorite. That's a college thing. That's a pro thing. It usually takes a while for people to get to love you. But Matthew Golden was so good, and he showed up in so many big moments for the Longhorns last year that even though he was only in Austin for 1 season, he's a guy that a lot of Texas fans consider one of their favorite players ever. Just a stud season and burst onto the scene. And I think he's earned the first round and really the top half of the first round conversation with what he did on the field and obviously what he did at the combine in Indy too.
Yeah, I don't think anyone expected it to be a 1-year deal for him down there in Austin, like at least 2 years potentially. And that now has Sark trying to figure out they're going to do a receiver here in the spring as that portal is going to open up pretty soon. But you look at him, like I go back to the Kentucky game because I know Isaiah Bond, who came from Alabama, had, was it the 4th and 27 from the goal line, that touchdown against Auburn? Like that's his moment there at Bama. Like he came over and he had some injury issues, got hurt in Red River. Then really from that Kentucky game on, it became golden where he had half his receptions in those final 6 games. And you go back to the SEC title game, the second time to play Georgia in Atlanta. Yeah, it's a loss, but still he was outstanding in that game. We talked about big moments, 4th and 16 in Atlanta there in that same building against Arizona State to send that game to either double overtime or overtime. Just ridiculous to get that play done. Like he became, like you talk about, that big play guy. Like what is it about him that led him to that ascension other than just like the pure opportunity with Bond's injuries?
Yeah, 4th and 13 to send that game in the double overtime. Hey, look, I only have watched it every day since the game went down on January 1st. I don't expect you to know it as well as I do, all right? But that was obviously the biggest moment of the year for the Longhorns. And man, I mean, the double move that he put on that poor Arizona State defender, right? 4th and 13, season on the line. Texas has national championship aspirations, and they were 2 touchdown favorites in that game. So if they lose to Arizona State, I mean, they're the laughing stock of the college football world for the entirety of the offseason. And at the perfect time, Matthew Golden runs the perfect double move. He gets open, and Quinn Ewers hits him in stride. I mean, he just has a knack for getting open. He's a crisp route runner. I didn't realize he was as fast as he was. Like, not that he plays slow or anything like that, but I don't think any Longhorn fan expected him to run a 4.29 and have the fastest time for any receiver at the combine. That's ridiculous, but he's just so versatile. He's a guy who can play all 3 receiver spots. Again, a crisp route runner, a guy who's got the speed to get open and also the speed to run away from defenders after the catch. Like, he is just the total package. I know he's only 5'11". He's less than 200 pounds, so that might scare some teams off, but this guy does just about everything you want a wide receiver to do, and he's got sure hands too. He doesn't drop the ball hardly ever. So yeah, I mean, I know I'm kind of dancing around the question a little bit, but what made him so great is just he doesn't do anything poorly. He's super fast. He's got great hands. He's a great route runner. He is the total package. And again, he's got that position versatility to where he can help out an offense in any number of ways. And I think you can put him in any offense and he's going to make an impact. So he's a great kid as well, super likable guy in the locker room. He came in and commanded respect in his 1 year at Texas. An easy guy to root for, and whatever NFL team ends up with him, I think is going to be lucky to have him.
Yeah, I think the versatility is something that teams always talk about that they want, but they don't always practice what they preach. And Carolina certainly does. They've played Xavier Legette, who they took in the first round last year out of South Carolina. They put him all over the field as far as at receiver positions. Jalen Coker, an undrafted free agent, they did the same thing. Like Thielen, he's mainly been in the slot, but they have shown the appetite to have their guys all over as far as those positions. So that's great to hear. Now, 5'11", like, because wasn't Texas, did they have him like at 6'2" or something like that as far as how he's listed this past season?
Yeah, I think he was 6 foot 6'1". You know,
Okay.
Texas does what every other school does, right? I mean, it's like a Hinge or Bumble profile. You know, if you're not 6 feet, you're going to round up to 6 feet to try to make yourself look a little bit better. Unfortunately, unless you're Kyler Murray, you can't get away with that at the combine. I still don't know how that guy was like 4 inches taller at the combine than he was at Oklahoma. But yeah, maybe we gave him a little bit of a bump on the official roster. But hey, there have been enough quote unquote short receivers who have had success in the NFL to where there's going to be plenty of teams who still fall in love with Matthew Golden despite being undersized.
Okay, going to fact check myself right now on TexasLonghorns.com. They have him at 6 foot. So, okay. We only lied about that 1 inch. It's important because if you're not 6 foot, like if you're 5'11", I'm sure every 5'11" dude out there across the world says they're 6 feet tall. And then, you know, we go out there and measure you. Actually, no, buddy, you're 5'11". Stop lying to the world and stop lying to yourself. Even though you can have that 6 foot tall energy, and he certainly has that. But Matthew Golden, that speed's obviously something that Carolina also could need. But like the big playability and what you saw at the end of the season, that's super enticing. You talk about he commanded respect in that locker room. Was he one of these team leaders? I know the year prior, especially when Texas also went to the playoff. It was the defensive tackles that really stood out when the leaders of that team. Was that the case, you think, for Golden? Like, did he feel like one of those type of guys, or was it more like a lead by example?
Yeah, I think it was more lead by example. I mean, he wasn't the most vocal guy in that locker room. You know, Texas had a lot of experienced players who were a part of that 2023 college football playoff team who kind of had that built-in respect from being on campus for a few years. But, you know, Matthew Golden, during his time at Houston, he actually played against Texas in 2023 and had a huge game against the Longhorns. So a lot of those players on that Texas team had to go up against Matthew Golden, and they saw firsthand just how good that dude was. And that was a big part of why Texas made such a push to go get him in the portal last off season. So they already knew, like when he got to campus, that sometimes a guy comes from a place like the University of Houston. It's like, well, is he good enough to – he was good enough to play there. And again, in a wide receiver room with Isaiah Bond, who's going to get drafted, Silas Bolden, who's going to get drafted, a couple of younger 5-stars who a lot of Texas fans were talking more about last offseason than Matthew Golden. He quickly showed up and proved that he was the best of the bunch. So that obviously helps too from a leadership and locker room standpoint.
Yeah, and like I don't think people really like understand. Just like Texas went all in the portal again at receiver last offseason. Like Bond, as you mentioned, like that was the dude to have after Saban retired late for Texas to get him. I mean, they also get Silas Bolden, and like that's when DJU was playing well at Oregon State. I don't know how Jonathan Smith got him to play that well, but for Bolden to be able to put up those numbers with DJU as his quarterback, clearly he's a good player. But like of those three, like those are the guys who are kind of busts. But Golden, I guess the least expected, you got the most, and he was really good for the Longhorns last year. And I would love to see that potentially happen here in Carolina, potentially there at 8th overall. I want to ask you about one other guy, non-receiver, just looking at the Panthers' needs. Like there's guys like Gunnar Helm at tight end who could make sense for Carolina. I don't know when he would be going off the board, but that's a guy who stepped up last year. And speaking of like guys who didn't really live up to the expectations, Amari Niblack coming over from Alabama. Gunnar Helm was already there in Austin. He took over for JT Sanders, played well. But I'm looking more at Andrew Makuba and that safety. Like that's a spot that Carolina, Dan Morgan, the general manager's already come out and said like they got to add there. And I look at day 2, Makuba, who started his career at Clemson and was last year at Texas, that may be a guy that makes sense. What makes Andrew Makuba a draftable kind of player, and what makes him special, and how he fit in this past year down there in Austin?
Yeah, Julian, I think Andrew Makuba is one of the most underrated players in this entire draft. Now, am I biased? Yeah, look at the hat I'm wearing and look at the color of the 2 TVs behind me. I think it's pretty obvious. But this guy came in and was a vocal leader right away. And he just does it all. I mean, he's, again, a little undersized, right? He's 5'11", 195. You would like your safety to be a little bit taller and a little bit more built than that. But this dude just has a knack for making plays. The instincts and the awareness, like if you're rating those on Madden, they're in the 90s. The guy just knows where to be, and he seemingly was always in the right place at the right time. he's been coached by a couple of studs. I know Brent Venables at Oklahoma hasn't been great, but a great defensive coordinator during his time at Clemson. Pete Kwiatkowski, who's at Texas, is one of the best in the business as well. So he's been coached by a couple of guys who are good enough to coach in the NFL, and he's played in a lot of big games too. He was a part of a Clemson playoff team his first year, obviously a part of a Texas playoff team this past season. Just a high character guy, a high motor guy, super physical, and he's got those instincts that I think every defensive coordinator salivates over. So I think he should be in the conversation. Maybe not Nick Emmanwori, maybe not that high. It's like top safety, but man, you shouldn't have to go to your second hand when counting how many safeties are better than Andrew Makuba in this draft. I think he's going to be a plug-and-play starter. And again, even though he's a bit undersized, the guy just knows how to play. He knows what he's supposed to do. Super smart, super instinctual. I think he's going to be a long-time starter in the league.
And that's the thing about him, because he is a little bit more undersized. Like Emmanwori, I don't think there's a lot of first-round buzz about him until like recently. This is the time of year where a guy like him, like he's 6'3", I think he ran a ridiculous speed as well. Like really good player down there, like not too far from us here in Charlotte, down in Columbia. But yeah, Makuba, strong player. And that's a good point about Pete Kwiatkowski. He was up there in Washington under Chris Peterson as well, for the folks that don't know. And Washington, during that time, put out a ton of really good defensive talent, not just on the defensive line, but also in that secondary. And you look at Texas secondary this past year, Michael Tapp was an All-American. He's coming back for another year. Jahdae Barron won the Thorpe Award for whatever reason. No offense out there to Longhorn fans, but what's not like, come on, like because let's do this quick aside, even if people don't care. What did you think about him winning the Thorpe for the best corner in college football, while Travis Hunter's out there winning the Heisman and the Blitnikoff for the best receiver and obviously the most outstanding player in college football?
Hey, he's a nice guy, that Travis Hunter. He can let somebody else have an award, okay? Like, Come on, he won enough last year. I'm biased again. I think Jahdae's a stud. Travis Hunter's a stud. There's a reason Hunter's going to go higher in the draft than Jahdae Barron is. So you can't go wrong. But Barron's a stud too. Maybe a little bit too rich for the Panthers at 8. You and I were chopping it up before we started recording. If Carolina trades down to the mid-first, he could be an option. Just another really versatile player who is going to make any defensive coordinator very happy.
Yeah, well, the Panthers looking at Longhorns again, and I mean, that's a great turn for that program, because I know for a minute there, they were just not putting out NFL talent, which is just crazy to think that talent's not coming out of the 40 acres down there in Austin. So, Brad, appreciate you, man. Check him out over on Twitter at Brad Kellner, also at Locked On Longhorn, or Locked On Horns rather. But he's the host of the Locked On Longhorns podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Check him out over wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, on YouTube. Plenty of stuff going on with spring practice going on. Arch Manning. It's time. Everyone's excited about that. We'll see what happens there this upcoming season, where Texas may be preseason number 1. Vic Schaefer's got the women in the Final Four this weekend down there in Tampa. So a ton going on Locked On Longhorns. Brad, appreciate your time, man.
Anytime, Julian. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Take a quick pause and come back and wrap up the show here on Locked On Panthers. All right, shout out to Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns. A bunch going on over the college channels. We got the Final Four going on, both men's and women's. Again, Texas women's team is down there in Tampa for the Final Four. You got baseball, if you care about that. I'm sure Brad talks about that. Texas got a top 10 baseball team right now. Their first year in the SEC, playing in, I mean, that's probably the best college baseball conference, right ahead of the ACC, of course, and a ton going on there, Locked On Longhorns. So check him out and all he's doing over on YouTube, and go give him some good reviews, as he just joined the network, and a guy who's been around Texas for a long time, did terrestrial radio down there in Austin, did some work up in Houston, now back down there covering the Longhorns full-time again. So appreciate him taking some time to talk to us, primarily about Matthew Golden, but also nice little nugget there on Andrew Makuba, and a little bit from Jahdae Barron as well. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because tomorrow it is Friday. I'm going to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me on Twitter or at me on Blue Sky to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Friday.